Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a huge fight, a real ideological battle over the future of American schools. And we're going to do it by looking right at the source materials that are fueling the whole conflict. All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to start with a single, really controversial statement from a teachers' union in Colorado that, let me tell you, got a lot of people talking. So, what's so wild about this? Well, it's where it comes from. This isn't some random comment on a blog somewhere. Nope. This is from a formal resolution passed in 2023, and it was passed by the Colorado Education Association. That's a union that represents almost 40,000 teachers. They didn't stop there either. The resolution also claimed capitalism gets in the way of fixing things like systemic racism, climate change, and even gender inequality. So you got to ask, right? Is this just a one-off thing from one union in Colorado, or is it part of something bigger, a much larger, more organized movement? To figure that out, we really have to dig into the groups that think along these same lines. And that leads us straight to the stated goals of groups like the Democratic Socialists of America. You probably know them as the DSA. They're actually the biggest socialist organization in the U.S. right now. If you look at the Denver DSA's own handbook for new members, their mission is pretty clear. They want to build a huge movement, one that gains democratic control over, well, every aspect of society. So we're not just talking about politics here. This is about completely changing who holds the power. And how do they plan to do that? Well, the handbook spells out their ultimate goal: socialism. And what they mean by that is a system where the working class, they use the classic term the proletariat, is in charge of the means of production. The factories, the resources, all the stuff used to make things. The idea is to stop labor from being exploited just for profit. Okay, so how do you actually get there? A really key concept for them is solidarity. The whole idea is that real power doesn't come from one person acting alone. No, it comes from groups of people. People who have the same economic interests all banding together to fight a common battle. It's all about mutual support, I've got your back, you've got mine. So the handbook then gets into the nitty-gritty, the actual strategy. And it's not just one thing, they have a few different angles. They talk about organizing workers into unions, of course. Then there's running their own candidates for office to change laws from the inside. They also focus on holding public events to educate people on their ideas. And finally, there's something they call direct action. And direct action is a really big deal here. It's not about, just asking politely for change. The DSA handbook is clear. It's about using the power of the group, think protests, boycotts, strikes, to force a change instead of just hoping the people in charge will listen. Okay, so now we've got to pivot. Let's look at a totally different story, a narrative coming from the critics, because they see these exact same movements and they don't see a grassroots effort at all. They see a calculated attack on public education. This headline here, it really sums up the whole other side of the argument perfectly. The claim is that teachers' unions have basically been taken over by what they call leftist ideologues, and that these people are turning our schools from places of learning into, well, political boot camps. So this perspective completely flips the script. The critics are arguing that these protests, the ones that look like they just sprang up out of nowhere, are actually, and these are their words, coordinated, well-funded, tightly stage-managed campaigns. They claim they're backed by big unions and powerful donor networks that are all connected to the Democratic Party establishment. And the accusations get really, really specific. Take this headline. It's about reports from Jefferson County, Colorado. The allegation is that a local union actually sent out emails telling teachers how to give students surveys about their gender identity. And get this, they were told to use paper and pencil, specifically to avoid creating a digital record and then to get rid of the surveys afterwards. The critics say this was a deliberate plan to get around state law and, keep parents out of the loop. So look, this isn't just some theoretical debate, right? It's not just a war of words. These two completely opposite ways of seeing the world, they crash right into each other in a real-world arena, and the stakes are super high. We're talking about your local school board elections. And how high are the stakes? Well, check out this number. According to the reporting from Chalkbeat, that's how much money unions and political groups raise to try and influence just one single election cycle for school boards in Colorado. So yeah, this is not your quiet, small-town political race anymore. This is a big-money, high-stakes battle for control. So what's the fight really about? It basically boils down to two main camps. On one side, you've got the teachers' unions. They're trying to elect school board members who will fight for better pay and better working conditions for teachers. Simple enough. But on the other side, you have what are called education reformers. They're backing candidates who push for things like school choice, giving individual schools more freedom, and using test scores to hold schools accountable.
But, and this is super important, it would be a huge mistake to think these movements are just one big, unified group, because they're not. When you look closer, you start to see some really deep cracks and some pretty intense debates happening inside their own organizations.
Yeah, far from being some unified army, if you look at reports from the DSA's recent national convention, what you see is an organization that's actually really divided about its own future. The debates were apparently super intense, and they showed huge disagreements on pretty much everything, from how to approach elections to how the organization itself should be structured. I mean, just look at this vote, for example. There was a proposal for socialists working in the labor movement to actively organize against the Democratic Party. Now, it ended up getting defeated, but just barely. 48% of the delegates voted for it. Think about that. That is an almost perfect 50-50 split on a massive fundamental question of strategy. And here's another one. A proposal came up to change how they vote internally to a system of one member, one vote. It was shot down, 60-40. Now, why is that interesting? Well, the people who voted against it claimed it was basically a power play by more moderate members. They argued the moderates were trying to use the wider, less involved membership to pull the whole organization to the political right and away from its more radical, activist core. So let's just recap what we're looking at here. We've got these incredibly bold, radical resolutions from unions. We have detailed playbooks for a socialist future. We've got these really harsh counter-narratives from critics. And we have millions and millions of dollars flooding into local elections. But at the same time, even within these movements, there are these deep, deep divisions about the best way to move forward. So with all of these powerful forces clashing, it leaves us with the biggest question of all. Who gets to decide the future of our public schools? That's really what's at stake.